Good morning, St. Paul's. May the Lord be with you. So let me introduce myself. I am Susan Quill, and this is Ben Keck, and we'll get into some of the meat and potatoes of that C.A.T, the church assessment tool. So I'm not going to read this off bullet by bullet, but as people are settling in, I want you to notice what we're going to cover today. We've got a lot to cover, and mostly the C.A.T, which is the church assessment tool, was done by a company called Holy Cow, and we will get a little bit more information about Holy Cow and what they do, but they were the ones who provided the survey that most of us took. We're also going to... Well, we're going to address that, Nancy. Hold that question. One of the wonderful things about what that C.A.T did for us is to understand the vitality and where we are as a congregation. There's lots of data, and we are going to do our best to distill that for us today. We're going to talk about what we can do and what we're going to do forward. I'm Susan Quill. This is Ben Keck. I am your senior warden, and Ben is the liaison for pastoral care. Like I said, we're going to talk about the C.A.T. We're going to address some of the questions that we've been fielding already, and if there's more questions, there'll be time at the end, so hold your questions for the end. We want to also let you all know that while we have 700 invited, there was 254 respondents. And while that response rate is just a quick little math formula of the 254 over 700, we really had a lot more participating than the goal was 300. So to have 254 out of the 300, our search committee was very pleased. And let me just remind ourselves that the search committee is the ones who assembled this survey and hired Holy Cow. All right, so Holy Cow, what the survey process entailed. There was a tool, it was an online tool, and there was also some facilitations for those people who needed a little bit of cat corralling, if you may, to get some of those responses going, like getting the teams together, or some folks who may not have been comfortable filling out the online. So we had the search committee offered paper copies, and those folks would fill those out, and then we had our staff, our beloved staff, enter those into the tool. The content, there was lots of questions on worship, on leadership, the engagement, and one of my favorites is the spiritual vitality of this congregation. All right, there's our cow. So, Nancy, see that in bold? Why were our questions so generic? Holy Cow is a consulting company that uses all of the data it collects from multiple denominations. It's to do benchmarking. And if anybody in the sciences, anybody in statistics, anybody in business, benchmarking, you have to be generic enough to understand what the data is so that you can compare it effectively against your database. So one of the things that was very interesting when our consultant gave us the data in a 2.5-hour presentation with the search committee in the vestry was that she continued to say, this data point means this, and this data point means this. And we were pondering. And she says, I know your data, but I don't know your story. We know our story. And this is why it's very important that we are distilling this information for all of you, because we know the story of what the data is likely backing up for us. And this is where then we'll get into some of the details here. So while this in red that it says that it's a tool for finding a new rector, it's really about us, right? It's really about what our congregation is hungry for, what we feel is our next place. I feel like this time is so exciting. We're on a roller coaster. We're chick, 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 chick up to the top, right? And we're hanging out on the top going, whoa, what's coming up, right? This is amazing. And to see this room filling up gives me such hope and gratitude for your all time, because this is what our bishop and resident, Jeff Lee, said, right? We are the people. We're the people. And so I want to welcome you and on this journey of getting to the precipice of our roller coaster. And let's see where we're going to go. So I'm going to turn it over to Ben, and he's going to get into the meat and potatoes of the data.
Oh, all sorts of data, and, well, I'm not going to make you do math. So the focus was to do that comparison, to give us that sense as where we stand with other churches that are comparable, and to use, that extensive feedback analysis. So all of those survey questions that were like, strongly agree, strongly disagree, but also the qualitative answers, the free-form answers at the end. So how do we integrate those two together? Help us find critical items that we find important to us and that stand out specifically for St. Paul's. Also give us some tools to see where we can make the most impact. And then finally, how do we integrate that feedback from the various free-form answers and integrate those into the solutions that we come up together. So overall satisfaction and energy. So across all of the survey results, the 254 members that answered, 43% are saying they're clearly satisfied with where we are. That's great news. There's also 46% that are in that wait and see mode. With the changes that have happened to the church over the past couple of years, there's a little bit of turmoil. So let's wait and see where we go. So that gives us an excellent opportunity. As Susan was talking about, this is that exciting time where changes can happen. The energy levels here at St. Paul compared to other congregations, it's right on the average side. Members did express that they want a more vibrant experience here, both spiritually and in potentially in the worship service. But there are some areas that we're really strong, that we have a strong passion about, particularly our music and our education. So,
and just last question: are we being compared only to Episcopal churches or churches of the same
similar size and similar economic situations, but most denominations? Yep.
Does that include in your universe evangelical churches that are popular today, or is it just whether it be traditional mainline Protestant denomination?
That I don't have the specifics on. Do we know?
Traditional mainline. Traditional, so it excludes the mega churches. That's correct.
There's a list of, based on how we answered the survey results, there's a list of factors that we feel are really important. These are the things that aren't necessarily the things that we do poorly or do well, but these are the factors that, if we did them well, would have the most impact on both our satisfaction and our energy. So I'll read those off. So making sure that we have persons who serve as leadership in our church representing our membership. A rector who helps us accomplish our mission by bringing out the best in everyone. The whole spirit in our congregation makes people want to get as involved as possible. The leadership of our church shows a genuine concern to know what people are thinking and when decisions need to be made. And that our rector articulates a clear vision for our church and keeps it before everybody in a compelling way. So those are the key factors that we feel as a congregation will have the most impact to make us more satisfied and more energized. So let's go to that list.
First, let's look at how we compare. So this chart compares our energy level with our satisfaction. Energy level is the up and down, the vertical piece. The satisfaction is the left and right. we're pretty close to in the middle. We lean a little bit low on the satisfaction side. So what does that mean for our church and our congregation? And typically churches in that lower left quadrant, they're considered in that recovery phase. So looking for ways to recover their congregation. The upper left is high energy, low satisfaction. Those are congregations looking for focus. So being where we are, either way, we need to look for changes in structure that help the congregation focus the energy that's here. So, a lot of dials. Again, the advantage of sitting close to front. I'm not going to focus on each and every one of these, but I'll tell you why they're important. This is that comparison dashboard, and this is the actual data for St. Paul's. This gives us a comparison, on 8 key areas, whether it's hospitality, morale, conflict governance, spiritual vitality, readiness for ministry, engagement in education, and worship and music. Those are the 8 areas. And these are a comparison, again, with all those congregations. So, if there are areas where we have real strength, engagement in education and worship and music, those are 2 areas where we see a high value. Those are areas that we need to see how we leverage those strengths. Areas in the middle we still need to focus on, but it's the areas where you see the dial to the left where we need to focus more energy. Those key areas are, hospitality, spiritual vitality, and readiness for ministry. And so let me show you the example in the survey. So for example, hospitality is a series of questions that say, hey, we're a welcoming group of people in this church. And the importance isn't looking at this information directly, but it's basically saying, there's a lot of people who strongly agree. There's a lot of people that agree that we're a hospitable congregation, but it's slightly less than what we're seeing in other comparable congregations. So what that means is we need to focus on it. And it doesn't just mean that we're, welcoming people into the church, but it's how do we welcome people into the ministry? How do we make sure people get involved? So it's about members of the church have been prepared to personally welcome guests into the worship service. Things like that. So each of those 3 areas are areas that we feel are important and add to our priorities. So as we look at the priorities, the top priorities here, and these are in rank order, are to develop and implement a comprehensive strategy to reach new people and incorporate them into the life of the church. The second one is make necessary changes to attract families with children into the youth of our church, children and youth of the church. How do we strengthen pastoral response for the needs of serving people in times of need? And that has many different aspects. And then the fourth one is how do we create more opportunities to form meaningful relationships? And that could be small groups, that could be, friends dinners, those types of things. How do we build a community of not just worshipers, but friends? Now, these are very common among many churches. I don't know if you go out and talk to any church, I don't know any church that doesn't say, we want to grow. Yep. So these ones definitely make sense, but what are ones that are specific to St. Paul's that stood out? There are these 3 that rank higher, much higher here than other churches. Strengthening our pastoral response of the church and serving people in times of need. So that one made our top 3. But some of the other ones are how do we expand our outreach ministry to provide direct services to those living in the margins of society? How do we strengthen the management of and support of persons in various ministries so they can do what they do best in work, that is meaningful and celebrated. Those are three areas that we felt as a congregation are particularly important to us. So what tools do we have to address those priorities? Well, we've got a lot of strength. And that came about through, both the 1 through 5 question responses and the qualitative answers at the end. Our commitment to outreach and service. We've got a strong dedication to outreach. We're very service oriented. The general overall feel is that we can have an inclusive leadership that values the congregation's input on making decisions, which is why we want to have these types of sessions. Appreciation for the former rector, having that clear vision, and members appreciated that guidance. And so that helps to form, these answers, and the survey helps to form where we go next with the next rector. Our welcoming atmosphere. So how do we turn that welcoming atmosphere into welcoming people into ministry? And then our music programs. We have a vital and rich music program that enhances our worship. Some areas for growth that were identified as part of the survey: the need to modernize the strategy for community engagement. So how do we reach out to the community that's near us? The demographics basically said we're a congregation that's relatively close, within miles of the church itself. So how do we focus on the importance of updating the methods, connecting with our community, and then focus on effective evangelism? One of the things we talk about in our strengths and an area of opportunity that's important to us is helping people in need. How do we find ways to do that? We are looking for a rector who fosters deeper spiritual connections. So making sure we're emphasizing inclusivity within the church and building those stronger spiritual bonds. Concerns about rigidity and church tradition. How do we balance tradition and all the great things we have in the Episcopal faith and adapting that with the new needs of potential parishioners and our existing parishioners? And how do we address evolving requirements of the congregation? We also have an interest in diversifying worship styles. How do we do that? Incorporating contemporary worship options is a potential, but how do we do that while maintaining the excellence we've had in the existing music program? So we're seeing these areas as ways we can grow and ways that we can evolve. And during that time of transition, both with the new rector coming in and just in general, the one thing that's always constant is change. So how do we work through change? Making sure we have strong pastoral care and vision. The new rector, and all of this is part of the congregation profile that's going out and searching for the new rector. The rector needs to provide robust pastoral care, and we need to make sure that's something we continue to focus on. Visionary leadership is essential. So those are key areas that the call committee is focused on. But again, the church isn't just the rector. It's all of us. So how do we find that balance between tradition and change? Maintain that traditional values, everything that brought us to this point, but be open to necessary changes and small adjustments as we go forward. Having that leadership, transparency, and involvement. So making sure that as a congregation, where this ship is going. We see, each and every one of us, more transparency and leadership. So that's our goal and our focus. And we want to make sure there's a desire in the congregation for greater involvement in decision making. So making sure we're reaching out in the right ways. So that's why you see small changes, like you see our faces a little more frequently in the vestry side. We've got pictures of the names are in the bulletin now. So making sure that you realize who you can reach out to and provide opinions. And then addressing unresolved conflict. This is something that always happens in change. It's about making sure that your voice gets heard. I always use the phrase, don't suffer in silence, but be open to change. So it's making sure that if there are existing conflicts, that we address those and that we make sure the past doesn't define our future. And so some great opportunities moving forward. I like the parallel to the roller coaster, except for one thing. We're in control. We drive the roller coaster. It doesn't just take us. So how do we strengthen small group ministries? So that's fostering deeper community connections. How do we develop outreach programs tailored to the needs of this community and the community that we live in? How do we encourage intergenerational engagement? So it's not just pockets. How do we bridge multiple groups? Finding, supporting and appreciating church staff and volunteers. During this change, the staff has gone above and beyond to make sure, the church continues to run, all the ministries we continue to operate, all of that happens. And it's been tireless and it's been continuous. So we need to make sure we're recognizing that value and appreciating those contributions. And then exploring ways to expand the worship style. It's a recurring theme. How do we preserve but enhance that beloved music tradition that we have here at St. Paul's? So that's a lot of information, a lot of data, a lot of distillation of that data. So I'll turn it over to Susan to walk through some of the next steps.
Great, got all this data. Now Ben has done a really great job of turning that data into information. Now what, right? What are we going to do? So some of these opportunities, we need, as your vestry, have to put this into action. Make it so that what our congregation has asked for is a tangible action to provide the fill of those gaps. And we're working on those. Those are going to be our priorities this year. The priorities are going to be in the order that the priorities were shared in the C.A.T. But there's some things that are already happening, which I'm really happy to share. So developing outreach programs. Patricia, if you are still here, you may not be. Patricia is our clergy liaison for the outreach committee, and there's such great things that are happening out of there. One of the things that I was in Kansas City for the Episcopal Parish Network, along with Ernie and Stephen and Patricia and Amy Zip and Bill Powell. And there is a company called FaithX. And FaithX, one word. Those IT companies like to smash words together. They're a data-driven company of statistics. And what they do is not only measure the congregational vitality of this congregation, we will take, there will be a small sampling of people that will take this, but it is also, we'll do a drive-by in the neighborhood and collect all data that is available. They pool it all together. How are the schools? What's the rate of poverty in the area? What are the potential for unhomed, etc. And I'm delighted to say that Bishop Ann has already contracted with FaithX for every single parish in our diocese, that's 80 of them, to leverage this tool so that we can be more intentional about our outreach and fill it up with some data. So that's an exciting thing that's going to be happening. The involvement or the supporting our staff. So it should be no surprise that we have shrunk a little bit over the last 10, 15 years, but our programming hasn't. And who's been bearing a lot of that is our staff and our clergy. That's not fair.
right? It's us. If we want the pastoral care, we need to figure out how to reinvent. We need to figure out how to reinvent our pastoral care responses to our congregation and to our folks. Barbara, I saw you. Barbara Driscoll is spearheading that initiative. Stephen Ministries sunsetted a few years ago, and we need to figure out how to bring that back to alleviate some of the burden on our clergy. Every Wednesday, our clergy meets to address the needs of this congregation from a pastoral lens. And Stephen has been incredibly gifted at connecting with people. He asked the vestries for each of us to provide 5 names of people that he should reach out to. That's amazing. I am so grateful to you for doing that and to bring people together. We are an amazing congregation. We need some more action to bring us together. So some of the things that we have in mind as a vestry, Ben touched upon this a little bit, having coffee hour chats with the vestry. Now you know our names are in the bulletin, but not only the names, but what areas we represent. So if Ben, as a pastoral care liaison, if you have concerns or if you know somebody who needs to be reached out, we need to know that. We need that multi and dual communication. So I think there's just a lot of ways that we're moving forward already. Okay, so some of those next steps. I mentioned the coffee hour chats, and if this kind of, what do you all think about this type of forum that we're trying to provide information to you all? Is this something that you want to see more frequently?
Yes.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so let's do it. I've already touched upon how the vestry is going to be using the C.A.T to do some more focused items. Particularly, we're thinking about a more family-focused 9:00 service, a little shorter. The sermons are going to be a little bit more tailored to the audience of families. I sat at the 9:00 towards the back so I could see how many little ones. I lost count at 15, just in the immediate area. So we do have new families coming. They're not here right now because they're probably in church, right? Let's do some more open forums. And then again, I am seeking participation. If we have said we want somebody, your vestry and clergy can't do it alone. It takes all of us. So those of you who are here, thank you. And those of you who know people who couldn't be here, tell them how awesome this was. Bring them forward. This is what we want. We want enthusiasm. And of course, we wouldn't be a house of worship without prayerful discernment. So pray for yourselves, pray for your search committee, who has done an amazing job this far. And if you haven't seen it already, the profile is out there on our website. If you know folks who might be interested or to receive the call, bring them forward. All right, here's where we let open the floodgates, Ben.
Sounds good.
Any questions?
Well, the one thing I do want to make sure that if you do want the 40-page document with, all of the responses, and I showed a brief preview of that PDF. It can be made available either through email, but it is 40 pages, so we want to print it as few as possible. Save the trees.
It'll be emailed, and if you all are interested, let myself, let Ben know, and we can certainly get that to you. The question is, will we have the link to the C.A.T on our website? And I think that might be something that is on a request-only basis. I think that's a probably more prudent approach to take, especially as we are searching for a rector. Yes. Yes.
What unresolved conflicts were identified?
Unresolved conflicts that were identified. I don't think anything specific, except there might have been some in the comments. We received 99 comments in that free open space, and it's an interesting read. So there may be some items in there that might be gleaning.
There were one or two specific examples of where somebody felt that something wasn't pursued the way that they expected. So those are the types of items. There's nothing overarching. I was in part of a Lutheran church 20 years ago where we were dealing with a huge problem with, homosexual ministry. And we had to resolve it. We don't have anything of that scale.
Lloyd asked, how were these the CAT results incorporated in our profile? That is our invitation for clergy to take the call to become our next rector. And this, what you're seeing here, is a much more, thank you, Stephen, a granular view. They took all of that, all those findings, and incorporated them in the language, recognizing that there's opportunities. There's opportunities, and here's what they are. Here's what we're really good at, music, right? So they did take that. And have you checked the profile yet?
No, I heard what you said about it, and I thought about that before I posed the question, but I just wondered how, was it incorporated?
Oh, absolutely.
If you had a search, you have the specifications and things that you're looking for to accomplish in the successful candidate.
Yes.
So that's what I was thinking of when I asked the question.
Absolutely. Yes, Michael.
Yeah, my question's kind of correlated to that same question about profile. When I looked at profile, I saw, one of our main focuses would be on worship. And my brain didn't click to the same sort of thing that we're seeing in the data here. When we have prospective candidates come, are they going to understand that we're really talking about, balancing things like music to other forms of worship? Or, what do you think? I understood the data here, but how do you think will people understand that, certain things in the profile will need kind of this is going to be could be a couple of different ways?
Yes, I think the question that you're seeking an answer to is so someone who is viewing the profile, who is considering applying, could view some of the data or the information differently. Correct? Did I get that right? And quite frankly, I think in the profile, it shares what are opportunities, which is code word for we need some help in these areas, right? And so if you're looking for a new job and you want some, I've done this over here and it was successful. And if you're looking for a new job, you want to be challenged, right? You don't want to do the same thing. So this might be an opportunity for that clergy person to go, I've done this, or I have ideas, or maybe this is the first place I can really stretch that. And so I think the profile, if somebody who is prayerfully discerning this call might read into it and say, well, they've got a really great music. Phew, I don't have to do that, right? But there's some opportunity that their gifts that they've been given can really shine. So that's how I would interpret how somebody would respond to it. Yes.
I'm curious about your measures on engagement and satisfaction and how that relates to the engagement of the 2/3 that did not respond to the survey, and how you interpret that, and whether they've got tools to go back and kind of resample people who were not engaged enough to participate.
Mm-hmm. Tools specific to Holy Cow? Is that what you mean? I would, Stephen. Look, I'm gonna bring in our interim rector, who is an expert at C.A.T, and he can try to field that. That's a very good question.
There are lots of ways to measure the size of a congregation. Typically, the most accurate way is what's called average Sunday attendance. And so, based upon your average Sunday attendance, those people who are most engaged answer in the survey. And so the data is valid in that sense. There are people who are, every parish is like an atom, right? It's got a heart center and it's got electrons flying around it. And every now and then an electron flies off somewhere and we say goodbye to them. And sometimes electrons come in and join in. So I would say that most churches take the data that they've received as you've had and said, this is valid data and actionable data. And those folks who are so far removed that they are not interested or are not committed enough to answer the survey, we'll let that go.
I have a question about the whole question of leadership. The bigger an organization gets, in my experience, the different kinds of leadership are needed, or valued, and so forth. And so I wonder, leadership's a big question. Do we have more granular information about what we think leadership is in this church? I can be somewhat specific. I felt that to a person, our staff thought Jean was an extraordinary listener and leader. But I don't think that was shared universally by people in the congregation. But this is a large church. To hear your staff is a critical thing. So I'm just kind of wondering, how do we expand our definition of the kind of leader we need and want?
The profile does address that in the sense that we want. There's a lot of language that says we want. We are looking.
When the C.A.T talks about leadership, they're not just talking about clergy leadership, they're talking about overall leadership of the congregation, right? I read all 99 comments. I think you heard when the search committee presented their results at the annual meeting that those opinions were mixed. What a surprise, right? I think that in a large, you are correct, Leo, that in a large church, different kind of leadership is required than in a small church. And we could spend a whole 6 sessions on church size theory, which I will not do. But typically in a larger church, there are a couple of things that people look for. I look for the person who is the tribal chief. They look for the person who's the chief medicine person. And they look for an administrative person, a person who leads that. It doesn't mean they have to lead all of them, but probably 2 out of 3 would be good.
I want to go back to the data and how many people did respond, and how to survey the people who we call on the periphery, not the electron steam, not the ones that are floating that they're on a roll but they don't care. That's a roll strike. But the people who didn't respond, who maybe come once every 2 months, once a quarter, just to the high holy services, etc. If you're trying to attract people in, I'm a sales and marketing expert, and that's what I do for a living. You always look for the low-hanging fruit. How do I get the low-hanging fruit first before I can tackle the really hard stuff? It seems like we would want to try to reach out to them, whether it's a personal invitation to reach out and see what they think, or some type of a survey that's constant, or some type of a drip campaign that we're constantly asking, what would it take to have those people more engaged, to get them involved too? And so I don't know how to do that. I'm not a church expert at all, but it just seems like we were trying to figure out a way to reach those people first.
Susan mentioned that I asked the vestry for 5 names. I also asked the staff for 5 names. I have 57 households to call on, representing, I don't know, times 2 at least. And in the names that I received, those were annotated, so people are talking about you all. And also that there were very few overlaps. In other words, I would have anticipated there'd be a number of overlaps, not so many. I think that's indicative of the fact that you're a large church. It also may be indicative of the fact that people don't feel they're not all that connected with each other, right? I've had 10 to 15 meetings already. I have 4 more this week. Like you, I spend a whole bunch of time selling for a living. And the only way you can do that is face-to-face, one-on-one. So I'm making those calls. If you're not called, it's because nobody identified you. what were the criteria for that? The criteria for that were whoever you think ought to need a call. The vast majority of people that I've reached out to have said that they welcome the call. There's been at least one person who said, I'm sorry, but I've moved on to mistake calls. Fair enough, but appreciated the call, right? I think that's what you got to do. And I think my job as interim is to get to know the congregation as quickly as possible. But I can tell you that there are two questions I ask. What happened? And what would it take for you to engage more fully?
Well, and I think your question is valid in the fact that it's what are those next steps? How we know that's a priority. I mean, that was the top of priority. How do we reach out, bring new people in? So, having somebody with marketing experience, having different voices help with the outreach, that's the key piece. And it's who's the right person I need to talk to help.
Right,
and helping to figure that out.
Also, Stephen's fantastic. And he knows
At what?
Give him the $5 he gave you a compliment.
I like that. But Stephen's fantastic. But he's a party of one, and he has a lot of other things to do besides that. How do we find a group of people and train and empower them to continue doing that work of calling people and asking people to do that?
Great segue. Thank you, David.
Who's the person that you identified who's working at Festival here? You sent me you gave me a terrific manila envelope, which I spent poring over between here and Kansas City, Missouri. So thank you for that. I owe you a phone call and an email, but you gave it to me last Sunday and I haven't been here all week. So, absolutely right. The clergy can do so much, but multiplying the number of people who are reaching out and reach out and touch someone. Boy, there's an old line. Reaching out and saying, we care about you. And we're aware that there's a deep need for pastoral connection. Emily, you had a question.
Well, I was just going to make an observation. So I, at the annual meeting, asked about this, getting access to the survey. There were a ton of people that said, thank you so much for asking. We want to know more. And I then reached out to Bill Powell via email saying, hey, I'd really love to get a copy of the survey. This is actually my professional work. I do this with large companies. Can I get it? And he said no. Well, he actually said, oh, you know what? We're not in charge of this anymore. It's the vestry. So you're going to need to reach out to them. So I thought, okay, I got busy. Susan, I apologize. I didn't reach out to you directly. I will because I want a copy of take a look at the survey. But then there was no word about this gathering for a lot of weeks until just this past week in terms of really communicating out to a broader number of people that this gathering was going to happen. And I know we want to be more transparent. We want to make this more accessible. And we need to do more of this. But I do think we're shooting ourselves in the foot sometimes by not getting the word out early enough and more broadly, because there's so many people that aren't here week after week in weekly Sunday services. And I can think of several who wanted to, they heard about this, like, oh shoot, I can't be here this Sunday.
Here's the good news. It's been recorded.
Practice.
Okay? So tell your friends that it's been recorded and that they can watch the whole thing.
And maybe this PowerPoint be available to people as well,
Yes.
in addition to the results of the survey.
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
Well, how is that going to be advertised? The fact that this meeting is recorded, which I think is a great idea.
Nancy, the usual ways that we get the word out, right? Parish notes, Sunday notes, announcements, website, carrier pigeons, all of it.
Well, I hope you will.
The thing is, Nancy, is that there are always people who say we didn't hear about it, who do not take the time to consume the information that has been shared.
I was paying attention to my bills.
I know that. I know that. Not a criticism. Not pointing the finger at you, sir.
I always wait till Nancy's finished. But I understood you said this kind of stuff can by request, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So get that word out that people have to request it. And then
That's right. And the reason is, for most people, if you look at this data without any background in it, it's like, I don't know, it's like reading the King James Version of the Bible. It's not in a language that most people use. You know, and what I will offer you is, if you read through this and you don't understand it, I'm happy to get a phone call from you or talk with you about it. Because this is stuff that it has been used in other congregations before. Jason?
Bob?
I'm wondering, the Thursday email that goes out, how many people are on it? Does it go to everyone? People were talking about like on the periphery.
Everyone who has an email address that we have, it goes to.
Wait,
What?
how many?
Oh, who wants it? Oh, there's a clarifying. Some people have opted out. Is that what you're saying?
13 or 1,400 people are on the text.
Sally?
Yeah, I'm a psychologist and I'm aware of data things, and one of the things that would be interesting to see that is a usual correlation in this kind of research is that the people who are more active are more satisfied. So, yeah, you know that too. Yeah, and so it's finding each person's little niche, I think, here to get them feeling active, like the central to the churches.
Before we take any more questions, because it's getting late, I want to let you all know that there is now budget available to hire a part-time person to do current member and new member engagement. And David, to your point, that person's going to spearhead that work, along with the vestry support, along with clergy and staff support. So that is exciting. We heard you. We've taken some of those dollars and we're putting them into action. Yes, Michael?
So I just like to say, I sit in meetings where I listen to daily cash stuff, where we learn about what's the best correlation and all that, where we sit there and figure out what are the most important bits of the data. And I just like to say, I like the way this presentation was done, and I do understand, I don't think everybody really wants to see every line item, and I do appreciate that as experience.
Well, thank you. I owe a lot of credit, all the credit to Ben, really. I think we'll close with our discernment prayers for those who are going to service. We can get you on your way. If we can all state together. God of revelation, awaken us to listen with our hearts. For what you are doing, as we seek your director for your church. We pray Jesus, King in the name of Christ. Divine love, remain with us, and with us forever. Amen. Thank you for being present. Have a wonderful day.